Hello, Sean. And Anna, without the visual.
Hello, sir.
There you are. Josh with full facial hair still.
Yep. I'm gonna have to figure out why I let someone cut my hair for me though.
I missed that Iron Man pose, I want you to know.
All right, so I'll call the 7th meeting of the Corporate Service Committee to order. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request, make sure you send any for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. And to make a specific request for this meeting, contact csc@london.ca. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I'll go to our consent agenda. I have not heard from any colleagues who want to pull anything separate. I know that there'll be, yes, Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I'd like to make comments and maybe a question on 2.1, and then I'd like 2.2, sorry, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5 dealt with separately.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So 2.1, I just have a question and comment on, so it can be fine. I just wanted to flag that for you. But 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5, I'd prefer to have separate votes on.
Okay. So can we, do we have consent? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like just to make a comment on 2.2, but I do not want it pulled.
Okay. Is everybody consent to having, Councillor Van Holst and Mayor Holder after?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the balance, although I would have a couple comments myself.
Yes, we'll get to the comments after. I just want to make sure that everybody pulls whatever they want to vote on separately, and then we'll make comments before we vote on it. Mayor Holder. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Happy to move 2.1, 2.2, and 2.6, subject to discussions.
So we have 2.1 and 2.6 being moved together by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Mayor Ed Holder, and I'll take comments right now.
And 2.2, Chair.
It's been pulled. Oh, sorry, 2.2 as well. It has not been pulled. Okay, so I have Councillor Morgan who wanted to make comments on 2.1.
Yes, so thank you to our staff for the report, I do believe it's the right decision to move forward with giving the direction to allow for the issuance of the debentures. I do appreciate the context that they provided based on the current market conditions. I know that our staff outlined as of April 2nd that no municipal deals have been successfully completed because of the COVID situation, the impacts that it's having on the market and the liquidity. But they also outlined the measures that since then the Bank of Canada has taken to inject some liquidity in the market. And I think that this will be a good test of the debt market for municipalities. We're in a very good position. As you know, our issuances have always been well subscribed. We have a great credit rating. We're in a good position to see how this goes. And so issuing the debt is the appropriate thing to do. I'll be very interested in knowing as soon as possible how it goes. I know we always call special meeting to actually approve that. But if our staff, I don't know if they have any updates on the market liquidity or anything since the writing of the report, but I would appreciate hearing anything additional that they have given the report, given the situation is changing. Do we know if there's any other municipalities that have successfully issued any offerings since the writing of this report? Or are we in the same general situation as contextualized in the report?
Thank you. I think Mrs. Barbone is also on the line and she can make any comments.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So there have not been, the municipal deals are still challenging. However, we are starting to see a little bit of movement on the provincial and a couple of bullet deals that did, I'm not sure if they're quite complete, but are almost in progress. So there has been a little bit of movement. So I think that's a very positive sign. We're working with our syndicate to be able to hopefully move this forward and keep a very close eye on what this is. Certainly the pricing, anything longer term seems to be a bit more of a problem just because a lot more uncertainty in the market, but we're keeping a very close eye on this. And the moment that we feel the market is stable enough to try to issue, we will definitely advise so we can get a committee meeting ready to go so that we can proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer, Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan asked my question about the first report, so thank you very much for that. I hope that the market conditions are favorable, and I imagine if they're not, I mean, if there are deals to be made, but the price is not good, we'll be dealing with that at the committee meeting. Hopefully the markets are functioning and we can get good pricing at the same time. I did have a question about the procurement report, and it's more generally about the procurement policy. So I mean, it's not directly related to the report itself, I suppose, but considering the situation that we're in with the pandemic, you have already within the existing policy framework what you need in terms of being able to procure things in a timely manner, should that be necessary. Just a question through the chair to the treasurer, perhaps Mr. Freeman. I see he's on the line.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll start, and if Mr. Freeman has anything to add, he can do so. So within the policy, we have a section that is for emergency procurement. So we are currently procuring under that section at this point in time. The policy does provide that at the end of the emergency that we would bring forward all those procurements. And we're given that still seems a long way out, we are looking at this point in time about possibly bringing something a little bit earlier instead of waiting right till the end, but that has certainly allowed us to continue to procure everything that is ultimately required at this time.
Thanks very much.
Yes, so Councillor Lehman is joining our meeting today as a visiting member, and he has a few questions or comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Chair. This is to Ms. Barbone, just following up on 2.1. Interest rates by Bank of Canada are getting close to zero. I understand now that with a lack of liquidity, there might be premiums to be incurred in issuing debt or acquiring debt. How do we have a choice to wait a little longer or to test the markets in a few months or so as liquidity floods into the market and interest rates for such debt better reflects the current low interest rate environment we're in with the Government of Canada, Bank of Canada?
So through the chair, we are looking at our pricing on a regular basis at this point in time. So because we issue debt on projects after we've already done them, this is certainly the sooner we can achieve some cash flow would be more advantageous to the city in the long run. However, right now, based on the pricing, we have some recent indicative pricing that have been provided throughout the day yesterday. And there is a fair bit of spread between the different institutions, and we're ranging from about 1.7 to about 1.9% at this point in time. I expect that that will still continue to fluctuate quite rapidly going forward, but we are continuing to look and to see when markets will stabilize to ensure that when we do go out, we will be able to sell, because it would be unfortunate to go out and not be able to achieve the full borrowing. And we know that a number of municipalities that have tried have been unable to issue the entire amount that they wanted. So we're certainly looking at that. And when we do get a sense, I don't expect the interest rates will change significantly, but we are keeping a close eye on them, and we'll report back when we have an opportunity to do so.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands that are up. So there's item 2.2. The clerk is going to update us on the bylaw that has been changed.
Thank you. And through the chair, there will be a revised bylaw, as you may see if you can, if you've logged in and can see the motion that is before you to approve the consent items, noting a revised bylaw for item 2.2, which will authorize the mayor and the city clerk. And that's replacing the treasurer in that bylaw. Thank you.
All right, seeing that there's no other comments or questions, Councillor Hopkins.
Sorry about that, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to make a comment on 2.2, and happy to support the amendment, the revised amendment to authorize the mayor and the city clerk to sign this agreement with the province regarding the provincial gas tax fund. This is really welcome news. I know when the provincial government announced this about over a month ago, I was at an AMO meeting and personally thanked the Ministers Mulroney and Suma supporting this gas tax fund and not changing that formula. I know the province was looking at it, sent out a survey last year to municipalities, but this is really important to large urban municipalities like the City of London, and really pleased, as you can see, we're getting over 10 million, a little bit higher than we got last year. And as we improve transit, this money is very, very needed. And I also want to thank the mayor and LUMCO as well for their support in the work advocating for this funding to remain in place. So a lot has changed as well since that announcement at the beginning of March. And as we move forward, I know the stability of this fund is something is going to be a conversation at AMO, but also how we are going to deal with any emergency funding that we may need for transit as well. So I just wanted to make those comments. Again, also to thank staff and Kelly Plechny from LTC in her advocacy work in working with the government and showing the importance of this fund to municipalities like the City of London. So thank you.
Mayor Holder?
Thanks very much, and thank staff for the work on this. I note that all of the monies through this go directly through to the LTC. One of the things that that we're advocating at the with Big City Mayors is the issues around increasing the gas tax, but giving it flexibility. So perhaps not even calling it that for any additional amounts. That's out there in the ether being considered right now. I'm going to presume, and I know the challenges the last time the provincial gas tax was dealt with, that there were issues that I think LTC, to be fair, was looking forward in a commitment from a prior government provincially. I can't tell you that they had already spent the money, but they were certainly looking forward to it, and it created some pressures when that did not occur. But this amount is geared specifically to transit, and I'll presume they need it, but don't we all? So I'm not going to challenge that this carries on its tradition and the direction of the province. And I don't know if Anna can reference any comments she's hearing from AMO about increasing the gas tax, not necessarily for transit, but for some one-time needs that the municipality has. I don't know if there's been any update. Lumpco's talked about it, but I don't think there's been, beyond this current commitment, I don't know that there's been a huge positioning the way that I would say that the big city mayors in Canada have done. Anna, any thoughts on that might help?
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you for the question. I know a lot has changed in the past couple of weeks, and transit, I think, is going to be a concern. We're starting to, need more money for transit as we deal with the loss of ridership, but also maintaining the safety of our buses and cleaning the buses and putting the protection there for employees. I know Deputy Mayor Helmer is here as well, who sits on the commission. But I think the provincial gas tax fund for now it needs to be stable. I think we are having conversations at AMO about the stability of that, but also the need moving forward for emergency funding for transit.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there's no other comments or questions, and it's been moved. 2.1, 2.2, and 2.6 have been moved by Councillor Van Host, seconded by Mayor Holder, and we'll call to question. Okay, we're gonna start calling out names, the votes. I was just trying to figure out who do I start with. So I'm gonna start with Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Okay.
Councillor Van Host, sorry.
Yes.
Councillor Morgan.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 6-0.
Thank you. Now we have item 2.3, which is the year 2020 tax policy. And this is tax ratio for council's consideration. I'll put on the floor. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, so this is a pretty important report, and we do have a decision to make within it. What I would like to do is put an option forward on the floor for discussion, and then I want to give my reasons for choosing that option. So I want to support all of the components of the staff recommendation, but I'd like to go with option AB2, which is shown on page 25 of your agenda package. I don't know if you want to seek a seconder for that first, and then I can make some comments on my rationale for this, or if you'd like me to make some comments first, but I'll leave it with your thoughts, Chair.
Is there a seconder for this, or Deputy Mayor Helmer? And I'll take your comments, Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, so for me, the tax policy report is actually fundamentally linked to the next report that we're going to deal with. And so I'm going to make some comments on both, but I'm going to save the significant amount of debate for the education tax report for later. The situation that we have here is there are things that we cannot control that happen with the way that the ratios are calculated. And the biggest thing we don't have control over is the way that properties appreciate through the MPAC process across the province. What we have is an awkward situation where commercial rates are appreciating, and frankly, farm rates too, are appreciating at a much faster pace than the other tax classes, which if we do nothing and don't make any adjustments to our ratios, would put the average commercial tax increase up around 7%, which is not acceptable during this time. We can only make so many adjustments. We can only bend that so far without making significant changes to the ratios on a permanent basis. We have been knocking down the corporate tax ratio. I think we should continue to do that. I think option AB2 provides a reasonable step in the short term for us to do that, but it is not going to provide the significant relief that businesses need. That will be provided if we can convince the province on the next report, the education tax report, to actually imbalance the inequity on the education tax side that exists in the province of Ontario to the disadvantage of London businesses. We're talking about a potential 7% reduction in the taxation that those businesses face. Education tax is a mid 30% size of their bill on the commercial side. So we can take options here where we can provide some relief to residential homeowners. We can provide a small reduction to the corporate tax ratio. We can bring the residential rate down to 2.5. And with our actions on the subsequent report, we can really speak, I think, a little more aggressively to the province about the importance for London businesses, the tax relief that the education policy tax changes can make for us. So the other thing I will say on this is, given the COVID situation, there will be a lot of temptation for us to try to use all the tools at our disposal to make changes. On tax policy and tax ratios, we should be very careful to stick to a long-term common sense plan, because it is very difficult to change them back later. So I think we should make a small move here. I think we should focus most of our efforts on the other components, like reducing the business tax pressure, on things like following through on the policy change on the education tax side. Those are my general thoughts. I'm really open to hearing what colleagues think about this particular option, and look forward to the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I just wanted to second the motion. I think I'll wait until later to weigh in on it.
Do you have any other comments, or Mayor Holder and Councillor Van Holst after?
Thanks very much. I think this is probably as good a compromise as we're going to get at this point. It's like, how do you slice the loaf of bread? Where do you put the pressure on that's greatest? Because no matter what, there's pressure on residential, any form of residential and any form of commercial. It's absolutely clear that that's the big challenge we're all facing, and these individuals who are facing. So, I mean, I think Councillor Morgan's comments about the education component being the key, I'm certainly prepared to support being very aggressive with the provincial government to garner their support to make this work. But it's hard, and we know it's hard for commercial. It's hard for residential. The fact that it gives a modest break to commercial is almost negligible, but is something. And when I say commercial, I mean commercial industrial. And I see what we've done with the multi-residential. That's probably the most dramatic impact with this. So I can get there. I wish we'd been in a position to be a little more aggressive on the commercial side, but I certainly understand the balance we're taking, and perhaps through the approach with the province on education, we may be able to do that. So just my comments, and I'm prepared to support the motion.
Councillor Van Holst. And then Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fine with this change. My concern and my desire was to see at least a downward trend in the commercial and industrial, because that's something we established last time. And when we had made our decision in the last instance, we discussed that too, and that was something we established. And you can even see that in the report, is that for London, there is a downward movement in those. And I think if we continue that, it will provide some confidence there. I like us, because these are difficult times, making as few changes as possible is good. And in this instance, we're I guess penalizing the residential class slightly less here. So instead of 2.6, it's 2.5%. I'm not as concerned about the multi-residential. I wouldn't be concerned if that didn't change, because I don't believe it has the kind of effect that we hope it would. But it's still small. So I'm happy to go with this. I would have supported either the direction 1, direction 2, or this 2B. AB2 is fine with me too.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple questions and really appreciate the conversation here and trying to understand the difference in the options. And I could hear Councillor Morgan sort of looking at it from more of an aggressive approach, and would like to hear from staff why option 1 was more of an option than the other options, but also to ask staff as well about MPAC and how they're going to be moving forward with their assessments. And given the COVID crisis that a lot of changes have been made, I know that's being postponed, but just want to hear a few more comments from staff about the alternatives between option 1 and option AB2 that we're looking at, as well as thoughts on the postponement of MPAC.
Thank you. Mrs. Barbone is on the line, and I think she may also Jim Logan also weigh in on this.
Yes, thank you. I'll start, and Jim can get ready. I'll pass that over to him. So I'm going to let Jim walk through the difference between the options, because I think he might do it in a more thorough way than I might. And with respect to the assessment, the province has deferred the assessment at this point in time. So it was to take place for 2021. That has been deferred. I don't believe that we have a definitive date on exactly when they are planning to do that. So we're still waiting for that information, but we know it will no longer be 2021. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jim, who will walk you through the variants and the options.
The options that were mentioned there, AB1 and AB2, are actually quite similar. The differences are identified in the percentage changes that you see there. So they are slightly different, but they're not tremendously different. The first column is really if no changes are made whatsoever in the tax ratios, and it just maintain them at the previous years. And the option A is just keeping all the increases for municipal taxes the same in the three major classes: commercial, multi-residential, and residential. And option B, which is equalizing the tax increase in the residential and multi-residential only, and no change in the other ratios. So AB1 and AB2 are something in between A and B. And that is those are the areas where council has made its choice in the past. So option C is really trying to focus on the commercial industrial classes and lower the ratios there as much as possible. And option D is about focusing on the multi-residential class and trying to do reductions in that class primarily. So that's the basic concept behind the various options.
Any follow back, Councillor Hopkins? Okay, so I have, awesome, thank you. I have Councillor Lewis, who's visiting in our committee today. Welcome, and you have some questions, and then we'll go to Councillor Morgan after.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you recognizing me and the good conversation we've had on this so far. Colleagues, I have to say, when I read this report over the long weekend, which felt like a really long weekend, I was leaning a little bit more towards AB1, but I appreciate Finance Minister Morgan's comments there on the value of AB2. Our budget chair knows this stuff really well, and while I'm a little bit concerned about the commercial rate difference in this one, because frankly, we have a lot of businesses that are not going to survive COVID-19 closures, and that's a reality that we can't avoid. But I think that this does strike, AB2 does strike a good balance, and it particularly, I do appreciate that there's a tiny reduction for farms as well, which, you know, are also a very important class that has been rising rapidly because of assessment values. So I'll support this when it comes to council. I appreciate all the work that staff has put into this, and I think it does strike a good balance. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the great conversation that everybody has offered today, because it's helped me wrap my head around this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Morgan, and then we'll go to Councillor Lehman after.
Yes, and through you, Chair, to help with some of the context on this, and then I'll have some comments. Could I ask through you to perhaps Mr. Logan, if he can explain the difference in the way that the different classes are valued, particularly the difference between the way the residential class is valued and the commercial class is valued. I think that will be helpful for the context, and I'll provide some comments after that.
We'll go to Mr. Logan.
The residential class is valued based on sales in the market. And everybody's familiar with that. There's many real estate transactions throughout the year, and that's what determines the values of residential properties. The commercial class is often based on an income approach, the rental values of the property, the rents that are in place, and they capitalize the rent values. And in some cases, it's based on market values and construction costs. In theory, all the values are based on market values, what they sell at in the market. But what they do utilize, because there isn't the volume of sales in the commercial sector, they will utilize rents and capitalize the rents.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. So that's really important context for why I'm suggesting we do go really aggressive on reducing the commercial tax rate as a reaction to a pandemic. What could happen a couple of years from now is, because of the way that commercial properties are valued, they will have a natural correction if residential classes are appreciating or maybe even devaluing slower or appreciating faster than the commercial class. In other words, what we do is we will shift this burden where you see us set a budgetary rate and then most of it fall on commercial, back to most of it falling on residential, and the commercial receiving the benefit based on the changes in market conditions. In other words, there's a natural way that this will correct itself over time if commercial does not appreciate as fast because of impacts of the pandemic. So if we set our policy tools too aggressively now, we may be creating a very significant burden on the residential and multi-residential class unintentionally a few years down the road, should the appreciation situation reverse. That's why I'm suggesting we take a slow and steady approach on our tax policy based on a long-term thoughtful perspective on this, rather than a reactionary perspective based on the current situation. And again, where we can help is in our discussion on the subsequent report of having the province follow through on a policy decision that would provide a significant benefit to the particular class, the commercial class that we are most concerned about right now, given the pressures they're facing due to MPAC appreciation.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Lehman, and then we'll go to Deputy Mayor Helmer after.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak to the committee. I think this is where Councillor Morgan and I differ. We are going through a once-in-a-lifetime economic catastrophe right now, and a burden that small businesses carrying, unfortunately, is going to prove unsustainable going forward. The only relief we can bring in is on the property tax side. We don't have a lot of tools that our governments above us do have. We have offered some relief on some deferrals, but again, that is not tax relief. That's just adding to the debt that small businesses will be carrying. The financial, big portion of financial help coming from the federal government, again, is debt related. The flower shops, the restaurants, the hair salons, the small business of London employ a lot of Londoners. And if they're not there 6 months from now, then the burden that we want to avoid going on the property taxpayers of residential taxpayers will be felt when people are unemployed. I really believe that we have to act more aggressively right now. I would prefer to see option A, to see commercial rates put down to still at a high rate, 3.5%. Because coming out of this, to hit the small business owner with, well, congratulations, you're back in business. Oh, by the way, your property taxes are going to jump 5%. Boy, that just adds to the burden. There is a potential for sure on the education tax side, but I really don't see that as a good shot right now. I hope that we would get some relief there, but I will not support this when it goes to council, because I think London has to act more aggressively. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. It's not. It's important tool that we have to use to keep our economy going after we come out of this. So those are just my thoughts to the committee.
Thank you. We'll go to Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. I wonder if, through the chair, Mr. Logan might be able to put into perspective the kind of magnitude of relief that would be provided if the province were to apply a uniform education tax rate here in London. So we're looking at what we can do at the local level around our own tax policy. But obviously, we're talking about this related issue, which is what the province does with its education tax rates. And I think it's helpful to get a sense of what that would mean if they were to implement that change here in London. And I wonder if it's possible to put some sense of the order of magnitude for us to consider as we're making these decisions.
Yeah, I think we're getting into some of the detail. It's in the report on education taxes. And I believe there was a reference in that report to in 2019, the adjustment would represent about a 7% decrease in the taxes being paid by a typical commercial property. And that's the 7% on the total tax bill, including education. Also in that report, there's a reference to would be in something like $10 million in the commercial sector, commercial industrial sector, if the tax rates were uniform. As referenced in there, the report was it's on page 41 of the agenda. We have not yet received a response from the Minister of Finance. So we're not really sure what the current position of the current Minister of Finance is on this particular issue. You know, it was promised in the past by a previous government that it would occur when the Ontario government budget was balanced, and that didn't happen at the point in time where it may have occurred. But as you can see now, there are all sorts of financial pressures on the Ontario government that it's hard to know what the reaction will be. But we have asked at the bureaucracy at the Ministry of Finance and about several weeks ago, and I guess was indicated to us that a response would be coming to the mayor's letter on the education taxes, but we haven't pursued the matter in the last few days at least.
Thank you. So I wanted to just ask about that because I think, you know, if the province were to make those changes, and they've already deferred the remittance of education property taxes to give municipalities a bit of financial flexibility, which is quite welcome. I think they're aware of how they can act in this area to be supportive of what's happening, particularly what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think in an ideal scenario, what we'd have is something like option AB2 enacted, which would reduce the pressure on residential taxpayers, multi-unit residential taxpayers, and bring the levels of increases down pretty substantially from what we would see if we did nothing. And then have the province also fix this unfairness issue in the education tax rates for businesses that would essentially take their increase of around 5% down to negative. So that would be great. I think that would be a good outcome. We'd have a lower burden on residential property taxpayers. We'd have a lower burden on multi-unit residential property taxpayers, and we'd have a significantly reduced burden on commercial and industrial at a time when they really need it. And that is something that the province can do and should do, and would fix an unfairness that's affecting businesses in London specifically. So I think that is the ideal scenario. That's why I support AB2. I think it would provide relief. This is something that's been pending at the provincial level for quite some time. And if they do that, and we went ahead, say, with option A, what we would see is a substantial reduction of commercial and industrial, but residential property taxpayers would be paying 4.1 increase, right? And so that would not be a good outcome, I don't think. So my preference is to go with AB2. I hear where Councillor Lehman is coming from. I think we have to be very clear that now is really the time for the province to deliver on this uniform tax rate when it comes to education rates for businesses. I think it's something hopefully that the Chamber of Commerce and other folks in the community who are advocating on behalf of businesses in our area will also support and kind of reinforce the call that I'm hearing from this committee. It certainly has come up as a way of providing a tax relief to businesses specifically. And it's something that's just been there pending. And I think it's a relatively easy thing that the province could do to help businesses here in our city. So that's my reasoning. I do support what Councillor Morgan's suggesting in terms of AB2, and I think the discussion has been very good so far.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Cassidy, who's also visiting our committee today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I too will support AB2 when it comes to council. I would have supported AB1 as well, which I believe was the staff recommendation, but they're fairly close. I want to address the issue of the economic recovery period after we could start to come out of the crisis mode that we're in right now. If you just read the different things that are going on fiscally at the various municipalities across Ontario, it's very clear that this is not something that each municipality is going to recover from on our own. We're going to need substantial assistance from the province and from the Government of Canada as we try to come out of this. As you know, we can't run a deficit, and I think that that's probably a good thing right now, because how would we recover from that in addition to everything else? the property tax, as we all know, is one of our very few sources of revenue here. And when you consider what percentage municipalities earn out of each individual taxpayer's tax dollar, it's very low. So when we look at using the property tax as the sole means of providing relief to people, not just businesses, but people as well who are struggling, we're really limited. We're really limited in that regard. I think not only will the province have to provide substantial relief to municipalities, the relief is going to have to be, to some degree, specific to each municipality. So London is a very unique case in how the education taxes are assigned compared to other municipalities. Our businesses pay a higher education tax rate than the City of Toronto. And the unfairness in that is quite blatant. That it's been allowed to go on for so long is disheartening. But I think we can, we've sent letter upon letter upon letter over the last few years asking the province to rectify this situation. I think we're in a unique position now where we can use it as part of our request for provincial assistance in our recovery. And we can ask the province to really look at this situation and get it started again as part of the relief package to the City of London and to our business community. So I have a little bit of hope that finally, after I think 3 or 4 letters have been sent to the province, that they may take notice when we send this one. And I really think that we can but we can express it in terms of our recovery from the COVID situation. So I will support this, and I'm happy to hear what everybody else has to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Councillor Van Host, and then we'll go to Councillor Hopkins after.
Thank you. I have a question through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Logan. Just perhaps you can give us a sense of the difference between AB1 and AB2 in terms of the dollar figure that the median commercial taxpayer would pay. So the difference between the 1.91 and the 1.8995 in terms of dollars.
Well, it's difficult to talk about an average amount. I don't really have that number in front of me, what the median or average amount would be, but the difference you can see on the total tax bill is 5.2 versus 4.9. So you're talking about 0.3% of 0.3 of 1%. So the difference is not extremely large by any consideration, I don't think. That's really to get an average, I'd have to go through and see exactly what the dollar amounts. What you'll find in the commercial sector is there'll be some properties that are very, very large amounts, and some properties will be under $1 million. So some properties will be hundreds of millions of dollars, and some be potentially $500,000. So it'll be all over the place. But that's the valuation of the properties. But the actual in percentage terms, the percent is relatively small, the difference.
Okay, thank you. It might be nice to know what that would be for the kinds of businesses that Councillor Lehman was describing. Your average hairstylist. I know I see down a place like Hamilton Road, almost every business is that small, almost mom and pop shop. And those are the people that we're most concerned about, because they're the ones that are most at risk. Thank you.
Sorry, the change, as I say, would be relatively small for all those kinds of situations. in
Yes, I
dollars.
realize you don't have that information.
I wouldn't want to give an amount without looking at a good example, a specific example that you'd be referring to.
Thanks. I guess what I'm asking is perhaps when it comes to council, you might have an example that we could talk about, and that would put it in perhaps a more clear perspective for people, the difference between AB1 and AB2 for your a small restaurant, for instance. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Councillor Lehman has put his hand up again, or, okay, Councillor Lehman.
Were we going to go to Anna? I thought our Councillor Hopkins.
Oh, sorry about that.
Don't want to jump in front.
Sorry, Councillor Hopkins. I apologize.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the conversation, the debate that we are hearing here. And Councillor Van Holst asked the question that I was hoping to get some understanding about the differences in percentages. And I hear Councillor Lehman's concerns around the commercial percentage for sure. And I understand where he's coming from. I know how difficult it is for small businesses, and any increase at this time is going to be difficult. I would have supported option one. Option two, listening to the debate, what I'm hearing is we're relatively, we're speaking of a relatively small amount. So option two, I'm leaning towards, but I appreciated Councillor Morgan's question around the value of how we deal with commercial properties, and it's based on income, and I think that's something to consider as we go through the COVID crisis here, how that will that's all going to change, and it's going to look very differently. But I think the bigger conversation is around the education tax. I know we're going to have that conversation later on, so I'll sort of leave it at that. This is the time that we really have to put the pressure, I think, on the provincial government. The provincial government is listening to municipalities. They do want to hear what the concerns are, and I think the more we can do that as a city, the more we can have that debate with the province. So I am happy to listen to Councillor Lehman. I understand his concerns. I used to own a small business. I know the stress that small businesses are having here, but for me, it's looking at all the different types and just sort of seeing as we move through this COVID crisis, things may appear differently as we go through it, and having some flexibility and conversations with the province is definitely where we have to go.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Lehman, and then after we'll go to Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yeah, thank you. And for a real check, I mean, let's look at Dundas Place. Dundas Place, we've just spent a lot of money and spent merchants around that area have spent a lot of their unearned money because of the construction. And we're just at the point now where we're trying to get that street in the downtown up and running. And again, as they come out of it, we're going to hit them with a 5% increase. In dollar wise, yeah, you know, dollar wise, it's not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but if you're a person and you're making $40,000 in your shop, an increase of $500,000 in property tax is a lot of money. Regarding assessments, usually that's based on income, but because we've had a lot of construction downtown with high rises, property taxes are going up, not just based on income, but on the value of the property if it can be redeveloped into an high rise. So that's putting other pressures on small business, because it's the people that are renting that gets the property tax. They get the property tax downloaded on top of their rent. You know, we're putting a lot of faith in relief that we're hoping to come from the province on the education tax side. You know, I'm reading the last response from the province. That was about as vanilla as you could get on our requests. So I guess I'd like to go to staff and ask them, two questions. One is, do they really see more of a concern coming from the province? I understand this is just an opinion based on the times. And what time frame would they be looking at? What time frame would we reach out to the province, and when would we expect an answer back?
I think this will go to Mrs. Barbone.
Thank you. Through the chair, at the end of the month, we're actually working on a comprehensive report on the financial impacts that will also include a couple other sections, and one is going to be advocacy. So we're looking at trying to put together a very comprehensive response to the province, and I would suggest that it would be prudent to add this to the conversation at the end of the month, so we can put that as part of our recovery plan, in addition to whatever actions the council may direct from the report specifically coming up next.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I'm not sure if it's helpful, but I'm going to provide it anyway, which is, if you're looking at a $600,000 building, this is through the chair to Councillor Van Holst, maybe you'd see a difference of $41 between AB1 and AB2, right? So on a $13,000 property tax bill, you might see a difference of $41. And for $1 million building, like something more expensive, probably be in the range of $68, the difference between AB1 and AB2. So that's the kind of magnitude. Obviously, there's a big range of values of commercial buildings, but for those kind of size buildings that are valued at that kind of level, that's the magnitude of the difference between AB1 and AB2.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Helmer, for doing some quick number crunching there to give us a sense of that, because like Councillor Van Holst, I will just say, as I continue to listen to the discussion, the one thing I think we all need to keep in mind is when we're talking about commercial property rates, we are talking about people as well. It's not just residential, but when we're talking about commercial, we're talking about those small business owners, the kind of folks that Councillor Hopkins has on Main Street in Lambeth, the kind of folks that are on Hamilton Road and out in Argyle, who are not just the commercial business owners or renters, but residents of our community too. So I continue to look at AB1 and AB2 as both viable options. I look forward to a response from the province, but I am concerned that with everything else that's going on, the upload of the provincial or the balancing of the education tax might not be something that we're going to see them rushing to our assistance with. So I'm going to keep listening and keep my mind open for council. I still think that I can support AB2, although I continue to think that AB1 might be a slightly better option, although with Deputy Mayor Helmer's number crunching, maybe not so much.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So I just also wanted to make some comments on the options that are presented to us. I was also, like my colleagues, in between AB1 and AB2, and I knew that my preference is AB2, but if AB1 was something that my colleagues wanted to go with, I'd also support, because it does continue to, reduce the residential and multi-residential, which is the homeowners and the renters as well, and especially in a time such as this. We really need to put that focus on there. And I also do think that we need to continue to support the businesses by encouraging the province and putting a little bit more pressure too in this pandemic and this, what we call a crisis, to make sure that our businesses in the core and across the city are not going to be closing their doors. And thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the quick numbers provided. The change for some, will be, it would be huge, and for some it won't be that huge. And that's where we need to do the advocacy work and continue to work with staff in the province, as they have been quite helpful in the last couple of weeks. And I'm very thankful and looking forward to what we're going to be able to do. And I'm happy that option AB2 is something that colleagues are considering, and I'm happy to support it as well. Now I'll call to vote, and I'll start with myself, and then Councillor, are we ready? Okay. Councillor Van Holst,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer,
Yay.
Councillor Morgan,
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins,
Yay.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, and that motion carries 6-0.
Awesome. Now we'll go to item 2.4, and that's the year 2020 education tax rates. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Morgan, Councillor Van Holst, and comments or question. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, so I really, would have preferred to deal with these two things at the same time. And as you can see from the debate, they do overlap substantially because, as Deputy Mayor Helmer pointed out, both things happening is really an ideal situation. I just want to, and I know we put this in a little bit of context, but I want to put the two real issues with this one on the floor for discussion. The one is a relief issue, and that this is a way to actually completely wipe out the property tax increase for this year because of the 7% impact on London businesses if the province were to do this. The second is an equity issue. It is very clear that there is an inequitable education tax system across the province, where some cities like Toronto, their businesses are paying a lower rate than London. And the only reason they're paying a lower rate is because the province has not fully implemented the uniform tax rate across the province. It started, it was paused around 2012, and I think the first year was 2013 when it didn't happen. And it was meant to come back into play when the budget was balanced. In 2017, 2018, the budget was balanced, but there was, the election was coming, and it never happened. And now what we have is we're engaged in essentially a letter writing campaign with the province back and forth, seeking further and further clarity on this. And that's not going to work anymore. Like the time to fix this inequity is now. It solves two problems with one stroke of the pen at the provincial level. It solves the equity issue, and it provides relief to an important segment of the London economy, and that is the businesses here. And all they are doing with this change is making it fair across the province. So I know that the motion is to write yet another letter seeking clarification on this. But what we have is we have a mayor with excellent connections into the provincial government. We've got Councillor Hopkins, who is an excellent representative on AMO. And I think what we need to do is take our advocacy on this to the next level and actually find out when this is going to get done. This is the time to make the move. And I think we need to clearly articulate to the province that this is the action that needs to be taken for equity and for relief for London businesses. So this is one where, yes, I'll support writing another letter, but I think we've got a great individual in the mayor's chair who has some influence, who can really hammer this home, and I hope Mayor Holder can really take the ball with this one and move it forward, because I think this is really critical at this time. It's been important for a long time, but it's critical at this time. So I'm happy to move the motion, but we really need to get this one done.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mayor Holder.
Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Morgan for not putting any pressure on the mayor's office, but I think the spirit of what you said is right. And while it was stopped at some prior government, and I can't tell you why this current government hasn't proceeded, I'm certainly prepared to drill down pretty hard and with the support from council, presuming this goes through, to take this forward. The only thing the recommendation didn't say was that the mayor should prepare a really strong, clear, nasty, whatever letter. But all kidding aside, I think it's time. You're right, and I think if there's an environment where I've gotten some key messaging from certain MPPs, government members who have said, what can we do to help? Well, this kind of advocacy would be useful. So I will certainly call on all horses to try to get this done if this passes through colleagues at council.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call to vote. Councillor Van Holst.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Morgan.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. Now we'll put 2.5, which is the property tax deferral options, which was the one that we moved on March 25th to provide some relief for property taxpayers. And staff have provided us with a couple of options, and I'm looking for someone to move an option. Any of the Councillor Van Holst?
Yes, I recall staff had made a recommendation there to defer things by 60 days, and I think that seemed to be the best path forward.
So option 1?
Thank you. I believe that's it. I'd have to.
Do we have a seconder for option 1? Councillor Morgan. Any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Helmer?
Thank you. I wonder through the chair if Ms. Barbone would like to speak to the report and give us a sense of what it would mean. I know we're talking about deferring a very large amount of property tax. And I just wondered if the treasurer wanted to speak to it directly.
Thank you, Mrs. Barbone.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So we, as requested, did go back and presented and reviewed a number of options, which we included in the report. A number of them, we've listed the pros and cons, and the reason we selected option 1 was because it's, I would say, is probably the most closely aligned with our fiscal capacity to be able to offer the deferral and still not go into borrowing from our reserve funds to go to the next level. So I think this is, we're ahead of some of the other municipalities in trying to look at the final tax bills. So I think this will certainly give some certainty. We cannot go beyond the end of the year, which does present some limitations just from the budget perspective that we need to try to balance from the cash flow to support our operations for this year. So by pushing them back the 60 days, the earliest payment that becomes due is in the month of August and right through until the middle of December, which is as late as we can go. But certainly it's approximately about $128 million from the city's perspective in cash flow that we are deferring. So that is going to the end of August is doable, but beyond that, we would need to look very closely at our cash needs and look at trying to have a little bit of temporary borrowing to be able to ensure we can pay the bills.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I just wanted to support this recommendation. Option 1, when I read the report, it just seemed the obvious option. I think mainly not having to borrow or go into our reserve funds. If we have options, I think that's the better way to go. I do think it will be interesting to see what the report coming back to us is going to be about the financial impacts. I think we need to get a little bit more information coming to us as we go through this process, but understanding I'm looking forward to hearing what that report looks like to have a better idea of where we are and maybe just doing it as we're doing it. I appreciate the work that staff are doing that step-by-step approach. I know we're also advocating, speaking of education taxes, seeing if we as municipalities can defer our payments moving forward to the province. And I know the province, again, is listening to municipalities when it comes to their challenges, as well as they give breaks to residents. And so option one is something I'm willing to support, and look forward to the report coming to us at the end of the month.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I wanted to make a couple of comments on this particular report, and I appreciate what my colleagues have said already. This is one where it's really tempting to want to go further, but there are some really significant unintended consequences of doing much more than option one at this particular time. One is changing the pre-authorized payment system is really bad for some individuals who do not want to stack up larger and larger payments near the end of the year. Some people want a very consistent payment spread across evenly across a number of months. This gives them time to actually get out of their pre-authorized payments if they like to, but we're not changing the pre-authorized payment schedule and creating unintended pressures or consequences on Londoners. We're providing some flexibility in the payment schedule, and we're doing that within our fiscal capacity to do so. But there's a really important part of this report that we need to be conscious of, and that is the premise of staff's recommendation on option one is based on an assumption that there is a gradual recovery to normal city operations by the end of June. And if that happens, we are in a position to be able to do this without having to borrow. And even in option one, they say any further relief measures are likely to require temporary borrowing from the city's reserve funds in order to provide the necessary cash resources to sustain our operations. So first off, that assumption may not hold. We don't know yet whether June is a reasonable time to return to any sort of or move towards normal city operations. And second, this move itself is putting us up to basically the wall on our capacity without taking more significant measures. So I think this is the responsible move, given that we do not know the content of the report that Councillor Hopkins mentioned, which is referenced in this report as well, coming forward to SPPC on April 28th. It is probably appropriate for relief measures beyond this one to be discussed by all of Council at SPPC on April 28th, and for us to examine our fiscal situation together. And although we don't know what that's going to look like, I can tell you it's probably not going to be good. If you look at the way that other municipalities are facing, and people who may have done that analysis already, that analysis has not been good in other municipalities. There are going to be significant pressures on municipal governments, which is going to lead into a series of important decisions that we'll have to make. So we can do this now. We can provide some flexibility for Londoners, but that conversation on our own situation as a corporation and a municipality is going to be really important, and that will determine the appropriate actions that we can take to support Londoners through this time, what actions we'll be able to take on our own, and what actions we will be dependent upon support from higher levels of government for. So I'm fully supportive of the staff's recommendation in option one. I think it's what we can do at this point, and I think we're going to have a really important discussion at the end of the month on our own fiscal state and our capacity to help moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I'll go to Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is important that we move forward in a measured way. I think there's a potential irony for us in this situation when you look at the people that are succumb to the COVID-19. It's not so much because of the disease. It's actually the body's response to it. That's the most damaging thing. And we've got to make sure that our response to this challenge doesn't put us in a very dangerous situation as well. So taking measured approaches is the way to go, realizing that we can always come back and do something further if necessary, but we don't want to go too far with our own immune response. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speaker on the list, so we'll call to question. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. I did ask a question earlier on, and I just wanted to make one comment, which is I think it's important that we're aligning as much as we can property tax deferrals with other kinds of relief that are being provided. So, you know, if we're going to defer rents, you know, landlords are going to defer rents, we're going to defer property taxes, financial institutions are going to defer mortgage payments, that especially when it comes to the time frame, that we're sort of all working within the same kind of time frame. And I do think it's really important that we move quickly to provide people with options when it comes to their cash flow. And this is one thing we can do at the municipal level that is going to provide some flexibility for people in the short term. I agree with Councillor Morgan that essentially we need to do as much as we can, as fast as we can, but not more than we can, and that what would be reasonable given what we know. So I think the 60-day deferral is very appropriate. I think it's actually responding very quickly to what we're seeing. I think it's going to provide more relief to people in the short term, which they desperately need. And so I think if we work through it, making sure that we're aligned and that all those different aspects of especially operating buildings, that those things are aligned as much as we can with the landlords and the financial institutions. And so I think by acting now and indicating where we're headed, that gives some certainty to the financial institutions that have already moved to do deferrals for their commercial clients. Landlords who are being asked to provide rent relief, now they know what the city is going to be doing, and they can make plans, you know, along those lines. They kind of see where we're headed in terms of the initial deferral. And I think we need to do what we can now and always be open to the idea that there might be more that is needed to be done. And I think as we move through the pandemic, that will become clear if there's a situation where we need to do more. And I think all levels of government really need to pull out all the stops in terms of responding to the crisis by doing what they can as fast as they can. And I think that's what we're doing with the 60-day deferral right now.
Thank you. Mayor Holder. Mayor Holder.
Thank you very much, Chair. It used to be in other circumstances when I would say that no municipality can do it alone, but I think this pandemic is evidence that if ever we've needed the provincial and federal governments to do more than they probably ever anticipated they would to support municipalities across the country, it's now. And if it isn't now, when is it now? I would point out that I think that we've had some very early positive indications from both senior levels of government through our government, local government politicians, and I appreciate that. I know we all do. And there's a limit that what we can do, because one of the things that we all know well is that no municipality can go into debt, and we don't have the resources nor the, frankly, legislative flexibility that we have at the provincial and federal levels. So it'll be our best efforts, all of us going forward, to advocate, whether it's at FCM, AMO, the various mayors groups that I'm part of, or individual dialogues with MPs and MPPs, where we can put the kind of persuasion in place that helps us get through this. I don't want to drag up an issue, except that it's all related, and something that Councillor Lehman said, and I think we all feel terribly, but we certainly feel for our commercial and business folks that are going through such a hard time, be it small, medium, or large business. I think the things that we're doing with this motion do as much as we can do for now, and then we'll see. But I think we'll know better too, because we'll know where the senior levels of government come in at as well. So prepared to support it, and I'm sensing from all of this that all of our colleagues do. Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll now, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Helmer, did you want to make another comment, or that was from earlier?
No, I just left my hand up.
Okay. All right, that's okay. So we'll call to question the property tax deferral option, and it's option 1, moved by Councillor Van Hulst, seconded by Councillor Morgan, and I will vote. And then call Councillor Van Hulst.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer,
Yay.
Councillor Morgan,
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins,
Yay.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 6-0.
Thank you. So we have finished with our consent items. Now we have no scheduled items, so we'll go to our items for direction. We have two items there, and they're both letters from both Councillor Morgan and Councillor Hopkins, who are seeking re-elections on both FCM and AMO. And I think it's admirable that they are doing that right now.
Sure.
So Mayor Holder, would you
Yes, I
like to
wonder,
move?
Chair, if we can do them together.
Sorry, we'll start with, we'll do them together, okay.
So in terms of Federation of Canadian Municipalities Board, I know we're delighted that Josh, who's done such a great job, is willing to stand again and as per this to support the direction, as per this item for direction to support Josh. And secondly, with respect to Anna, in her role with AMO, I think has been stellar and has made tremendous impacts, and I'm delighted to move in conjunction with that direction that she carry on in her role with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario on the board.
Thank you. So we have a mover, and I'm assuming that the hand up right now from Councillor Van Hulst is a seconding?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank
So we
you.
have a mover and a seconder, and now we'll take comments or questions. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to make a couple comments. It will be almost 2 years in August that I have been a member of the Large Urban Caucus, the board at AMO, and I have chaired it for almost just over the past year, which allows me to be on the executive, which also allows me to be part of the MOU. And I have been privileged and honored to do so on behalf of the City of London, and have learned so much. I'm just I feel very lucky almost to be in this position, not only bringing the voice of London to the Large Urban Caucus, but large urban municipalities to the province. It's really an important part of the conversations that we are having with the province. We have almost been meeting on a monthly basis at the MOU table with the many items working with the province, as well as with LUMCO. I know as large urban municipalities, affordable housing, transit, climate change, homelessness, poverty have been part of the many issues that not only large urban cities experience, but also representing smaller cities at the province too, learning what other municipalities are going through, what we have in common, and how different we are too. So I am just so honored and privileged, and will also be putting my name forward to chair the Large Urban Caucus as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Hulst, I'm not sure if your hand is still up because you want to make a comment, or yes, Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you very much. So thrilled to support both Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Morgan in this. I think it's been really obvious that the value that we get from having our colleagues in these organizations at a governance level. So I'm thrilled to be, I guess, the seconder for this. And thanks to both Councillor Morgan and Councillor Hopkins for the time they put into it.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to our colleagues for your words of support. I know that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities will be going through a very interesting time over the next little while. Our annual conference was supposed to be in Toronto. Given the COVID situation, that will not be happening. And work is being done at the executive level to determine even how we're going to run the election for the board this year. There are discussions happening, and I don't know what that will be, but we do know we've been asked to proceed if you're interested with this particular request of support from your municipal councils. And I'll keep you posted on what that looks like and what will be required to support that in the future. I have had the privilege of serving in a high capacity at the FCM, chairing one of the major standing committees, the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Committee, as well as being vice chair of the Elections Readiness Committee, which although usually only operates, once every 4 years or so, given the minority situation at the federal level, has been active all the way through and continues to be active even with our advocacy on support for municipalities given the COVID-19 situation. And the FCM is being very active about the capacity of municipalities to support relief efforts and the need to have support from the federal government to be able to do that. In the recovery phase, it will be incredibly important for us to be able to emphasize municipalities as an important partner for stimulus and infrastructure spending. We will be the body that will be able to put federal and provincial actions on the ground and make them a reality in that recovery phase. So not only through the COVID phase is it important for us to maintain presence in organizations like AMO and the FCM, but in the recovery phase as well, it will be important for our voice to be heard as municipalities as important partners that can really execute the actions that the federal and provincial governments have the capacity to take. So I appreciate the support today, and we'll continue to work hard on your behalf.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins, and if Councillor Van Holst put up his hand again, is it? Oh, thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak again. I think it's important that I give the committee a bit of an update on the AMO conference, which is usually scheduled in August. AMO has not made a final decision as to if that conference is going to happen or not, or how it will happen. I think are still conversations that AMO are having, but the bylaws that AMO has will allow the current board of directors to stay in place. Usually the elections are done at the conference, and depending if that's going to take place or not, that will, the current board as is will probably remain, but things are still in the process of being figured out. And I also wanted to say thank you to government relations staff there. Have been so supportive as well to the role that I have at AMO, and without them, I know it really has helped us as a caucus moving forward in the organization and understanding issues and communication. So again, thank you to staff, and thank you again to the committee.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else who's put up their hand to make a comment or ask a question, so we'll call to vote, and it's both item 4.1 and 4.2. Now I will go to Councillor Van Holst.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Morgan.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Mayor Holder.
Absolutely. Yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. There are no deferred matters or additional businesses to be considered. I will look for a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Oh, we'll do a hand vote. Everyone, vote yay. Awesome. The motion carries, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Best of fortune, Anna.